My fiancé texted me tomorrow is my daughter's recital. Come support her while my son was fighting for his life in the ICU. So I ended the wedding right there because I finally saw the truth. My name is Aaron Salt, and until that week, I thought I was one hard conversation away from finally building a peaceful life. I was wrong. The text came in at 11:43 p.m., just after a nurse adjusted my son's 4, and told me with that carefully neutral voice hospital staff use, when the truth is too cruel to say plainly, that the next 12 hours were critical. I looked down because my phone buzzed against my leg. Gavin, tomorrow is Isla's recital. Come support her for a second. I just stared at the screen. Around me, the ICU was dim except for little islands of light over each bed. My son Noah was so still it made my chest hurt to breathe. 7 years old, all long lashes and pale cheeks, and a body that had fought infections so hard it had finally crashed. He had always been loud, quick, impossible to keep clean. Seeing him silent felt unnatural, like winter grass trying to pretend it was alive. I typed back with shaking fingers. I can't. He's fighting for his life. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then you're not the partner I need. I read it once, then again. I actually checked the name at the top of the screen because I could not believe that the man I was supposed to marry in 6 weeks had chosen that exact moment to make my son's medical emergency about his disappointment. A strange calm settled over me. I stepped out into the hallway, pressed call, and when Gavin answered with a clipped, irritated, what I heard myself say very quietly, "We're done." He gave a short laugh. "Aaron, don't be dramatic." Dramatic. My voice cracked so sharply that a nurse at the station glanced up. "My child is in intensive care and my daughter has been practicing for months," he snapped. "I'm asking you to show up as a family." "If you can't do that now, what does that say about our future?" It said plenty, actually, just not what he thought. I ended the call, blocked his number, blocked his social media. Then I went back into my son's room, sat beside his bed, took his warm, limp hand in both of mine, and whispered, "I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." The next day, a little afternoon, Noah opened his eyes. He blinked once, slow and confused, then found me. I had imagined that moment 1,000 times during the endless night, but in every version I had thought I would cry with relief, call the nurse, maybe laugh. Instead, I froze because his lips moved, and in a voice scraped raw by oxygen and fever, he whispered, "Mom," about him. I leaned so close, my hair brushed his pillow. "Don't talk, sweetheart. Just rest." His fingers twitched weakly in mine. "About Gavin," he breathed. I heard him. A cold line moved down my spine. Noah had been barely conscious when the ambulance came. Gavin had been at our house for maybe 10 minutes before the paramedics arrived. 10 minutes in which I'd been trying not to panic while Noah burned with fever and struggled to stay awake. Gavin had stood in the kitchen, angry that I'd ruined his plans for the week by refusing to discuss flowers for the rehearsal dinner. I had assumed Noah hadn't registered any of it. I was wrong about that, too. Noah swallowed hard. He said I always ruin things. My whole body went rigid. He was drifting again, eyes fluttering. But I stroked his hair and fought to keep my voice steady. "You don't ruin anything. Do you hear me? Nothing. None of this is your fault." He looked at me through half-lidded eyes. I could barely breathe around the pressure building in my chest. "I know," I said. "But he doesn't get to be in our lives anymore." Noah's shoulders loosened by a fraction, and for the first time in 2 days, his face looked peaceful. That was the moment I knew leaving Gavin was not an emotional reaction. It was overdue. I met Gavin Mercer 2 years earlier at a charity fundraiser my boss dragged me to because, as she put it, "You own one decent black dress and you're pleasant under pressure. You're coming." I was a senior office administrator at a private physical therapy clinic, then juggling schedules, invoices, personnel nonsense, and single motherhood. With the grim efficiency of someone who had learned there was no cavalry coming, Noah's father, Trent, disappeared before Noah turned 2, drifting into one short-lived job and relationship after another, until even excuses became too much effort. By the time Gavin appeared, I had built our life out of routines. Morning cartoons, packed lunches. Friday, pizza library on Saturdays, emergency savings in an envelope hidden behind the flour canister because Noah had once turned the apartment upside down looking for pirate treasure and never checked the kitchen. Gavin seemed stable. That was what won me first. He was polished in a way that made other people feel a little disorganized around him. He sold commercial insurance, wore crisp button-downs, remembered details, and had a daughter, Layla, who was 9 and serious and took ballet so intensely you'd think the fate of civilization depended on pointed toes. He told me he admired how devoted I was to Noah. He said I was strong. He said he loved that I put my son first because that's what real mothers do. What he loved, I eventually learned, was not that I put Noah first. It was that I had already been trained to ignore myself. At the beginning, Gavin's demands came disguised as reason. Isla gets overwhelmed with loud environments. Maybe don't bring Noah to dinner tonight. It would mean a lot if you could leave work early for her showcase. You know, if we're blending families, you can't keep treating your son like he's the center of the universe. Every sentence arrived wrapped in language that made resistance sound selfish, mature, balanced, fair. And because I was so tired, because single motherhood teaches you to equate sacrifice with love, I kept compromising. Noah was spirited, sensitive, the kind of child who asked too many questions and felt everything at full volume. He was also asthmatic, prone to chest infections that could go from manageable to terrifying in hours. Nothing made me angrier than people who treated that as inconvenience rather than fact. Gavin never openly said Noah was a burden. He didn't have to. He said things like, Lila deserves peace. He said, you always have a crisis. He said, we can't build a healthy relationship if every plan depends on whether Noah is having a good day. The first time my stomach really tightened around him was 8 months before the ICU. Hila was having a birthday dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant. Gavin loved Noah had a cough that morning, the barking kind that usually meant a miserable night ahead. I told Gavin we'd celebrate separately. Maybe bring Isla a gift the next day. He stared at me across my kitchen counter and said, one evening, Aaron, can your son not be your whole identity for one evening? I should have ended it there. Instead, I said, he's sick. And Gavin sighed, actually sighed like I was creating paperwork, and replied, you baby him. That's why he's so dependent. I remember standing there with Noah's inhaler in my hand, feeling something essential tilt out of place. But then Noah shuffled into the room in dinosaur pajamas, cheeks flushed, and Gavin knelt, smoothly smiled, asked if he wanted to show him the Lego spaceship they'd started last week. That was Gavin's talent. He could wound and charm in the same breath. It made me doubt my own instincts. He proposed on a Sunday afternoon in a botanical garden with Isla beside him in a cream dress, and Noah holding a ring box he was too excited to keep level. People clapped. Noah grinned because he thought happy grown-up moments were simple things like cartoons taught them to be. Isla looked pleased because she liked any event with an audience. Gavin looked triumphant. I said yes because everyone was watching, because Noah was smiling, because I wanted to believe effort could transform discomfort into love, and because women like me are raised on the lie that if a man is dependable on paper, we should be grateful enough not to ask how he feels in our bones. 3 weeks before Noah landed in the ICU, I found out Gavin had already begun redrawing our future without me. It happened on a Tuesday. I had stopped by Gavin's townhouse after work to drop off some papers for the caterer. He was in the shower. His laptop was open on the dining table, an email chain visible because he never logged out of anything. I wasn't snooping, not at first. Then I saw my name. The message was from his sister Dana. Are you sure Aaron understands how things will have to work once you're married? Gavin's reply sat beneath it. She'll adjust. Noah needs structure anyway. He's too clingy with her. Once they move in, he'll have to learn not to dominate every room. Leia shouldn't have to shrink in her own home. My hands went cold. There was more. Worst case, Erin gets upset for a while, but she's practical. She knows she can't do better than a stable household. I don't remember breathing. I remember the kitchen clock ticking. I remember the absurd detail that he had left a tea ring on the table with no coaster, something he'd lectured me about before. And I remember reading the line again. She knows she can't do better than a stable household, as if I were some woman he had rescued from a storm, instead of a mother who had built a life brick by brick while he floated through it criticizing the architecture. When he came downstairs to his hair, he saw my face and knew immediately. Why were you reading my email? He asked. That was his first question. Not what did you see? Not. Let me explain. I laughed once, a brittle sound. You think my son dominates rooms? He set the towel over a chair. Aaron, don't twist this into something it isn't. Then tell me what it is. He spread his hands, patient, managerial. I'm saying no one needs boundaries. Laya is older, more disciplined, and frankly more adaptable. You indulge him. My vision sharpened in that dangerous way it does when anger becomes clarity. He's 7, and that's old enough to understand that the world does not revolve around him. I should have left. Instead, I stayed and argued because that's what women do when men are calmly trying to reshape their reality. We argue for our humanity as if it's a point open to debate. By the end, Gavin had kissed my forehead and told me I was stressed. I went home sick with unease. But weddings are machines. Once moving, they bully you forward. Deposits paid dress, altered guests flying in. My mother, who considered marriage the final exam of womanhood, kept saying things like, every couple has tension before the big day. My older sister Mira was less forgiving. Mira and I had never been particularly close in childhood, but adulthood carved us into allies. She was blunt divorced and immune to male polish. When I told her about the email, she sat on my couch, sat down her wine glass, and said, Aaron, that man doesn't love your son. He tolerates him when it's useful. I flinched. She didn't soften. And if a man tolerates your child, he is not loving you either. I wanted to argue, wanted to say Gavin tried that, Leia needed space too. Instead, I cried. Mira held my hand and waited until I was done. Do not marry a man your child has to recover from, she said quietly. I think some part of me decided then. I just hadn't admitted it yet. The infection came on fast. Noah woke one Thursday shivering despite the June heat, his skin burning and his breathing shallow. By noon, we were at urgent care. By evening, we were in the emergency room. By midnight, he was in intensive care with pneumonia complications and doctors saying words like sepsis protocol and oxygen saturation and responding but guarded. Gavin showed up at the hospital that first night wearing a navy blazer as if he'd come from networking drinks. He kissed my cheek, asked if there was coffee anywhere decent, then spent 15 minutes explaining how impossible the recital seating would be if I couldn't commit to attending. I stared at him. Sure, I had misheard. My son is in critical condition, I said. He lowered his voice, glancing toward Noah's room as if my distress were embarrassing. And I'm trying to make sure Leia doesn't feel abandoned. She has you. She expected you too. I laughed in disbelief. Gavin read the room. That was when his expression hardened. You always do this. Do what force everyone to orbit Noah. The words hit so hard I actually swayed. He continued relentless. Now that he'd started, my daughter has spent her whole life being gracious around your chaos. One recital, one important day. I'm asking for one day where her feelings come first. My body filled with a rage so pure it steadied me. Before I could answer, Noah made a choking sound from the room. I turned instantly, and by the time I looked back, Gavin's face had changed. Not softened, closed, calculating. He knew exactly where he ranked in that second, and he hated it. That was the him Noah meant when he woke in the ICU. He had heard enough to understand the basics. A grown man was angry that a sick child needed his mother too much. Noah remembered that even through fever, children always do. Once Noah was stable, things started surfacing fast. I think when one illusion breaks, the others lose strength too. Mira came to the hospital with fresh clothes, my toothbrush, and a notebook because she knew I'd forget every instruction the doctors gave me. While Noah slept, she sat cross-legged in the window chair and asked, Do you want the clean version or the full version? The full version, she inhaled. Good, because Gavin's been awful to Noah longer than you realize. The words made me flinch, but I made myself listen. Mira had picked Noah up from school twice that spring when I was stuck in late meetings. Both times Noah had made little comments. She had dismissed them, but not now. Gavin says boys who cry become weak men. Gavin says when we move in with them, I need to stop needing help at night. Gavin says Layla is easier because she knows how to behave. Each sentence was small enough to survive unnoticed. Together, they formed a map. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Why didn't he tell me? He probably thought you knew. That hit me harder than anything else. Because of course he might have. Children assume the world adults build around them is intentional. If pain keeps happening, they stop seeing it as reportable and start seeing it as normal. I sat beside Noah's bed all night after that, listening to the ventilator hiss for the patient in the next room and hating myself in a quiet, methodical way. Not because Gavin had deceived me, but because some part of me had been trying not to see. The next morning, my phone lit up from an unknown number. I answered only because I thought it might be the hospital lab. It was Gavin. So, this is how you handle conflict, he said without greeting. Blocking me, I handled it by leaving you. You're emotional. I'm accurate. He exhaled sharply. Leia is devastated. I almost admired the nerve. Then comfort your daughter. She needs closure. No, you need access. Silence. Then his voice changed. Cool and contemptuous. You are making a catastrophic mistake over one argument. One argument, I repeated. My child heard you say he ruins things. He paused. And in that pause, I heard truth. Not surprised that Noah had heard. Not shame, just annoyance that I knew. Aaron, he said finally, if Noah overheard an adult conversation and took it personally, that is unfortunate. but he does create instability. Something inside me went still. Don't call me again, I said. Then I hung up. This time I didn't shake afterward. Noah was in the hospital for 6 days. The day he got moved out of ICU, he asked for great popsicles, his stuffed shark, and whether his Pokemon cards were safe at home. The day after that, he wanted to know if Gavin would still be marrying me. Children ask the most brutal questions while staring at ceiling tiles. I pulled my chair closer to his bed. No, I said. He looked worried. Because of me, I leaned so fast my knees hit the rail. Never say that again. His eyes widened. This is because of him, I said, carefully, fiercely. Because grown-ups are supposed to make children feel safe, and he didn't. You did nothing wrong. Do you understand me? Noah blinked. Then tears welled in his eyes. I didn't like him when you weren't looking. That sentence will stay with me until I die. Not because it was dramatic, because of the quiet exhaustion in it, the burden of a child who had been trying to manage an adult's moods alone. I kissed his forehead and said, "You never have to like someone just because I do." He nodded once, then whispered, "Okay." A week later, after Noah was discharged with a stack of medications and strict instructions for rest, I went home and began dismantling the future. I called the venue first, then the florist, then the rental company, then the bakery, where the cheerful woman on the phone said, "Oh no, honey," in such a sincere voice that I almost cried into the dish rack. There were losses deposits. I wouldn't recover explanations to make. My mother was scandalized. Gavin's relatives sent 2 offended messages and 1 paragraph about miscommunication. Dana wrote that I was punishing Leia unfairly. Gavin himself escalated from righteous to pleading to vicious in under 48 hours. He emailed when he realized he was blocked everywhere else. You're destroying 2 families because you cannot regulate your emotions. Then you have always been intimidated by what a structured home requires. Then when that failed, no man is going to sign up for your baggage and your chaos forever. I printed that one. Not because I needed proof, but because I wanted a physical reminder for the next time loneliness dressed itself up as compromise. Mara came over with takeout and a roll of heavy-duty trash bags. Together we boxed up the wedding favors, the fake eucalyptus garlands, the untouched guest book with the Mercers and Salts in Boston gold. At one point she held up the seating chart and said, "Can I set this on fire in your sink?" I laughed for the first time in weeks. Noah would love that, I admitted. So we did. He watched from a kitchen chair wrapped in a blanket, solemn as a tiny king overseeing an execution. When the cardboard curled black at the edges, he smiled. "Looks better now," he said. And he was right. The aftermath was messier than the decision. It always is. Leia's mother, Karina, called me 2 weeks later. We had never been close, careful, civil, bonded mostly by the shared challenge of Gavin's self-importance. But her voice on the phone was tired in a familiar way. "I heard what happened," she said. I waited. Then she added, "I should have warned you." That opened a longer conversation than either of us expected. Karina told me Gavin had spent years ranking needs inside every room and resenting anything he wasn't on top of. Leia's activities had never really been about Leia. She said they were showcases, proofs, extensions of him. When Leia cried from stage fright at 8, Gavin didn't comfort her. He lectured her in the car about embarrassment and discipline until she threw up. He likes devotion, Karina said, but only when it flows toward him. I sat on my back steps while Noah napped inside, the late afternoon sun hot on my knees. "I feel stupid," I admitted. "No," she said. "You feel betrayed. There's a difference." Then she surprised me. She told me she was relieved. "Leela." "Yes," she said, "if I married him, Noah would always get blamed, and then maybe eventually she would too." I closed my eyes. Even the children had seen it. Especially the children. That night, I sat on Noah's bed while he sorted cards into battered plastic sleeves, and I asked very gently, "Did you ever feel like you couldn't tell me things about Gavin?" He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "You looked tired when he was around. It is hard to explain the pain of hearing your child describe your survival instincts as if they were weather." "I'm sorry," I whispered. He looked up. "You're here now." That mercy nearly undid me. By August, the fever dreams of the hospital had faded into scar tissue. Noah got stronger. Color returned to his cheeks. He started racing me to the mailbox again, still losing because he was dramatic enough to collapse on the lawn halfway there and claim tragic injury. We built back our routines: Friday pizza library, on Saturdays emergency savings in the flour canister. Only now there was something new in the house. Ease. Not perfect happiness, not some movie-ending glow, just the absence of tension. I hadn't realized we had begun arranging ourselves around. No more checking Gavin's tone before answering. No more editing Noah's volume. No more translating my instincts into arguments fit for male approval. One evening in early September, I found Noah in the living room drawing at the coffee table. He had sketched our apartment as a crooked square with windows too big and clouds that looked like sheep. Inside were two stick figures holding hands. "That's us," I asked. He nodded. "No Gavin?" He shook his head, focused on coloring the roof. "Blue, though roofs are not blue in reality and children are wise enough not to care." Then he said, "I like it better with just our voices." I stood there so still I could hear the fridge hum. Later, after he went to sleep, I wrote that sentence down in the notebook Mira had brought to the hospital because some truths deserve to be kept where you can find them again. Months after the breakup, Gavin sent one final email. No insults, no accusations, just a single line. "I hope one day you understand what you threw away." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it because I did understand. I had thrown away a wedding, a fantasy, a professionally wrapped version of stability that came with hidden clauses and a quiet cost my son would have paid in pieces. And in return, I kept something better. Peace trusts the right to believe my own eyes, the chance to teach my child that love does not demand he earn his place in the room. If you want a dramatic ending where Gavin lost his job, or everyone in his life turned on him, or he appeared on my doorstep in the rain begging forgiveness, I can't give you that. Real life is crueler and kinder than that. Crueler because people like him often keep going. Polished and persuasive, finding new audiences for the same old hunger. Kinder because I no longer need him to collapse in order to know I was right. The real ending happened on an ordinary Tuesday night months after the ICU, when I tucked Noah into bed and he caught my sleeve before I could stand. "Mom." "Yeah, baby." He looked sleepy. Hair sticking up in 3 directions, shark tucked under one arm. "You picked me." I sat back down beside him. "Always," I said. He nodded like he had expected that answer all along and closed his eyes. I watched him breathe for a while in the dim light from the hallway, steady in, steady out. The kind of sound you never take for granted again once you've heard machines do the work for him. I used to think being a good mother meant enduring more, explaining, more forgiving, more absorbing every sharp edge until everyone else could stay comfortable. I know better now. Sometimes being a good mother is not staying patient. Sometimes it is not blending bending or keeping the peace. Sometimes it is hearing one cruel sentence at the worst moment of your life and understanding finally that love, which competes with your child's survival, is not love at all. It is appetite. And appetite is never a foundation to build a home on. I did not marry the man who wanted me most when I was divided. I chose the child who needed me whole, and I would do it again every single time.